You ever play a game as a kid that you liked, yet as you grew older, you heard no one ask about it? Cartoon Network Racing is exactly that type of game for me. Released in 2006 and developed by Firebrand and Technics, CN Racing is, of course, a racing game crossing over different Cartoon Network cartoons together. Now, I know what you're thinking. This looks just like a Mario Kart Double Dash clone, which is a fair observation. Double Dash was the newest console Mario Kart at the time of this game's release, and they evidently took some inspiration based on the two-person per kart design. But that doesn't make this game bad or mediocre. Far from it, in fact. So, without further ado, let's jump into Cartoon Network Racing, explain the game, and show how it takes the original concept of Double Dash and builds upon it. CN Racing is a Double Dash clone, of course, but not every game inspired by another game is bad or mediocre. There's a lot that this game does to change up the formula and add more to what Double Dash established. Let's start with the characters, since that's the first thing that hits you about this game. This game has a roster of characters all coming from Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Courage, Cow and Chicken, and I Am Weasel. If anyone even remembers that show. Now, while this is an alright pick of shows to be represented, I can't help but feel the game could have picked more contemporary shows rather than some of the first ones on the channel. Whereas Ed, Edd n Eddy, Billy and Mandy, Foster's Home, or Samurai Jack, there are much better shows at the time that deserve some representation in the game, so to only represent the first few shows is odd, especially when no one talks about Cow and Chicken or I Am Weasel anymore. But, as it stands, I guess it's okay. Like, being accused of stealing someone's joke. I guess it could be worse. The roster is surprisingly vast, with just about any character you would ever consider playing as, from main characters to characters like Dexter's parents, Fuzzy Lumpkins, him, Red Guy, Eustace, and Muriel, and Chicken's friends for some reason. I think for the most part the characters translate pretty well into 3D. Turning a 2D cartoon character into a 3D model is not easy, especially back in the PS2 era, so I commend the developers for doing a good job. For the most part. While a lot of characters look good, there are some that look just... Each character comes with their own stats and special abilities as well. Yes, special abilities, which allows me to transition into the gameplay itself. The gameplay is a lot like Double Dash, with new mechanics and concepts implemented here and there to give the gameplay its own identity. Firstly is the addition of the Toon Power Bar, as the manual calls it. Yes, I did break out the manual to research while writing. Anyways, it's a meter that fills up as the player drifts, further incentivizing the player to drift on sharp corners to fill the gauge. This is where the special abilities come into play, as when the bar is full, you can use one of the two special abilities that belongs to your supporting character. These can vary from a cartoony fighting cloud that can damage anyone near you, to levitation, heat ray vision, to a speed boost, which I personally found the most useful. There's a ton of special abilities at your disposal for you to use, and it really adds more strategy to the game, so that you not only consider the abilities of your supporting character, but also consider when to use it, and also what areas on the track are easy to fill your gauge at. Staking also helps with this. There's even an energy drink can item that can fill your meter instantly, which allows me to transition into the items. What would a kart racer be without them, right? Much like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing though, they're mostly ineffective. There are some useful ones like the missiles, energy cans, and I heard that there's the shield item that slows down every racer in the vicinity, though I personally have never encountered it. I've never been the best at aiming bomb items in kart racers though, and the oil slick item is essentially useless because the handling feels no different when driving over it, at least to me. To be fair, the design of the game forces a lot of racers to be tightly knit on these tracks, leading to absolute pandemonium whenever you cross a row of item boxes, meaning that you will get hit a couple times at least. If you thought Mario Kart Wii was crazy with how many items they throw at the player, then you really haven't seen anything yet. And mix this with the special abilities I mentioned before, and absolute chaos will reign on the track. That being said, it at least makes the game interesting, and there is a lot of strategy to it. The best way I could describe the game's balancing is if you were cooking and needed to balance the ratio of two ingredients. This game dumps an entire package of both, so it's both luck-based yet skill-based with how you need to drive, find shortcuts, and drift to fill your gauge. Speaking of items though, when you do get hit with an item, a skull and crossbones icon will appear over the player that hit you, meaning that if you hit them back with an item, you can make a revenge attack. That also instantly refuels your gauge. Man, if there's one thing this game makes sure of, it's that you always have a full gauge. This is yet another mechanic that adds more to the gameplay, as it adds depth to the items. Now, when you get hit, it's not only a mere inconvenience, but now you feel compelled to retaliate. It makes it matter more. That being said, though, the gameplay isn't perfect. There's actually a lot wrong with it, in fact. Firstly, the physics are all totally whacked out. Staying true to the game's cartoony roots, characters bounce when they collide, and carts handle like a car in the cartoon looks like it would handle. And while that's nice, it's incredibly unwieldy, and just the slightest love tap can cause your car to careen across the road, sometimes down a pit. Turning can also be an issue, as carts make such wide turns that you colliding with a wall is an inevitability. My favorite is when this results in a cart repeatedly hitting two parallel walls, like the springs in Sonic. Chicken is basically the only character you can pick that won't completely lose control when you inevitably get hit by something, which is why all the gameplay in this video is of me playing him. Sadly, as the result of these exaggerated physics, this game has a steeper than usual learning curve, and I really struggled during my first couple races. I was being slapped around constantly and didn't have full control of my cart. It wasn't fun. That was just my experience, though. I tried getting a friend to play the game with me to see their reaction, as well as to just get some multiplayer footage, but unfortunately my second PS2 controller doesn't work, and it's not like there's some place I can just get another one in a timely fashion right now, so... The presentation is also a big sticking point for this game. I already touched on the characters looking pretty good, but the environments on the tracks based on shows look considerably good. They don't look as good as something like Powerpuff Girls' Relish Rampage or Ed and Eddie Misadventures, but it still looks pretty good for the era, and it blends different art styles pretty well. This only includes the tracks based around cartoons, however, as the majority of the tracks in the game are traditional themes such as pirates or the Arctic. And while some of these look okay, they don't compare to the aforementioned, and some just look outright bleak. The music, on the other hand, is pretty sweet. While the songs for the generic courses aren't much to write home about and are just kinda generic, they aren't composed poorly or anything, but the real showstopper are the songs for cartoon tracks. They're all remixed versions of that cartoon's theme song, and they sound so good! Some of them, dare I say, sound better than their original ones. You've been listening to them throughout this video too, so let that serve as a taste. Some of the courses themselves are designed a little sloppily, with some having sharp 90-degree turns, which are the absolute worst in a racing game. Personally, I consider it a cardinal rule that you do not include sharp 90-degree turns or corners on tracks in racing games, because if you screw up, which is quite easy to do given the fact that the right way is actually obscured from your view, it can take forever for you to correct yourself, as you have to go into reverse, readjust your position, and then accelerate from a complete stop. It's not fun, and games like Mario Kart and CTR know this, as their tracks don't have that, and all the tracks turn at a gentle angle. Unlike Eminem's Kart Racing, where that's basically their only design. Besides the racing I've mentioned, there's also a ton of other modes, such as Super Tournament, which has the player race through all cartoon tracks, ending in a second track based on one of the cartoons in order to unlock them, and the Cartoon Eliminator, which is an elimination-styled mode where the racer in last place, when the lap is finished, is eliminated and loses. It sounds fun, but seeing as how going from first to fifth and then back to first again within a matter of seconds isn't uncommon, so it's more frustrating than normal races. Also, since I know someone's gonna mention it, I am aware that there is a DS version of the game, but 1, I don't have a DS capture device, 2, what do I look like I'm made out of money to you? And 3, the game is much different than the PS2 counterpart, being inspired by Mario Kart DS instead and having less mechanics. Overall, if you're a fan of cartoons, especially Cartoon Network cartoons, and want a kart racer featuring some of your favorite cartoon characters, I definitely recommend you check this game out. It's not that expensive right now, and it's a pretty worthy alternative to Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing. Just do keep in mind that you need some patience to get used to the controls. If you're just a casual fan of cartoons, or you just like kart racers, I'd advise you express some caution, as there are better cartoon licensed games and kart racers out there for you to check out. So with that said, I'm Rhythm Rev of YouTube, have yourselves a good night, and take care.